Alright guys, this video I'm just going to talk about what you need to do in order to hit 85 miles per hour on your SeaDoo 325, whether it's an RXTX or a GTX. I'm essentially just going to show you everything that I've done to my ski. Hitting 85 miles per hour is not really that difficult, but you do need a tune. But there are a few lesser known things that I'm going to show you on here as well, in addition to the other performance upgrades that I've done. So let's get right into it. Alright, so one of the first things I did was just install a rear 90 intake that I made. I got rid of all the factory piping, which actually I have it over here so you can see. This is the exhaust resonator, but there is just a ton of tubes and hoses and everything that came off. It really kind of cleaned up the engine bay, but I just by default run a rear 90 air intake on all my skis. So when I did that, I actually noticed a 6 or 7 degree decrease in intake air temps, and about a 200 to 300 RPM stable increase with the rear 90 compared to the factory air intake. So it's definitely worth giving that a shot. It's super cheap to do. You can build your own air intake. You don't have to buy a pre-built rear air 90. I do have a video on how to make one. But that was pretty much it for the air intake. Super easy to get that installed. And then the next thing I installed was the Fizzle intercooler pipes with the TurboSmart Gen 5 race port. This part is absolutely not required. You're not going to see any performance increase. I mainly just did it for looks and sound. The factory Kaiser blow-off valve is actually used on one of the Porsches. It's a very well-made valve. Zero problems with this. You can run the factory valve without any issues perfectly fine. The next thing I did was install the Solus 1419 impeller, mainly because it was recommended for the Stage 2 tunes, which I'll get to in a second. I know a lot of people who are running the same tune that I'm running also run the factory impeller, and they run equal relative results. So I may end up trying to go back to the factory impeller just to see how it does. Mainly because, you know, Solus, I don't know what's going on with them. They seem to have a shaky reputation lately, where impellers will just kind of completely come apart at high RPM, and then it'll just destroy your jet pump. So I have about 40 hours or so on the Solus impeller without any issues, but I may still experiment and go back to the factory impeller just to see how that does. The next thing I'm running is the unlocked ECU that I bought from Riva. I bought this last June, where this was pretty much the only option you had. There was another company where you could send your factory ECU to them and they will do the unlock and then send it back to you. I actually kind of like the idea of having two ECUs. This is the factory one, it's been untouched. And then of course I have the unlocked ECU that's in there now. The process has changed since then. I believe you can now have your ECU tuned without removing it from the ski. I'm not 100% sure on that. The process is different for the 325s because they swapped over to the Bosch MG1 ECU instead of the standard ECU. They've been using it for years. And the main difference is that the Bosch MG1 ECU it just performs better, but it also has an O2 sensor signal channel, which of course the SeaDoo 325 does have an oxygen sensor now. It's one of the only skis in the world that does have closed loop cooling, which is a huge plus. And with that, I'm running the Riva Stage 2 8700 RPM, which is the target, and I think I sustain around 8400 RPM while at wide open throttle. I'm using the Map Tuner Nano. This is great. Kind of just flash the tune every once in a while. I'll just data log, pull some data logs, and just open up a mega log viewer just to see if everything's running well. The Riva over-the-shelf tunes are pretty solid. I've never had any problems with them. They're perfect for anybody who just wants to flash their ski and go and not have to worry about keeping an eye on your wideband O2 sensor to see if your air-fuel ratios are good. You don't want to monitor your knock and all that stuff. The Riva's tunes are, you know, they're solid. You just install the tune, you're good to go. The next thing I did was grind my IBR stops. I made a video on this, so if you're not 100% sure what I'm talking about, you can check that video out. But essentially, this at full trim up, my jet pump nozzle was almost perfectly straight out. It was not pointing up at all like it should. So I ground down the IBR stops to get some extra trim range. which of course keeps the nose of the ski out of the water, less drag, less resistance, and of course better top speed. That alone, because mine was so bad, I got 3 to 4 miles an hour gain, which was huge. That's a little bit more than common. Most people get like a mile an hour or two, but for me, because mine was so bad, that netted a huge gain, and it was very, very easy to do. It took about 15 minutes. And the next thing I did was grind down the ride plate. So if you aren't aware, Riva actually made an announcement about a year or two ago where they were talking about how the ride plates, before they would kind of chamfer up, they were basically flat all the way through, or even worse, they would have a kind of like a bulge in the middle, and then they would kind of taper out. And they claimed that that was affecting top speed for a lot of people. There's been a lot of people saying that's not the case, or it's not as bad as they would seem. Either way, I tried doing a service myself. Riva does offer a service where you can remove the ride plate, send it to them, they will grind it down for you, and then you can put it back on your ski. But it is a total nightmare to do that because it's sealed in. This is your essentially your radiator, so you have coolant pumping through here. You have to drain the whole cooling system. It's just a total pain in the ass. So I did the service myself, just using a straight edge to kind of see what the curve looked like and see if I had any bulge. And I did. My taper didn't start until around right here. And I did have like a bit of a bulge in the middle there. So I just took a belt sander, which is it's somewhere over on the shelf over there. But I essentially just would sand off some material and then take my straight edge and see how it looks, and then keep on sanding until I got it to basically where I want it to be. So if you look from a side profile, I know it's hard to see on camera, but it basically comes out and it just swoops up at such a slight angle, and it's much better than it was stock. All that work, I think I got like a mile an hour out of it, which, you know, it's not nothing. It's still a mile per hour. But it was nowhere near as significant as the gain I got from doing the IBR stops. The last thing that I did was fix the boost leak that was occurring on the 325, which is actually a common problem. I also made a video on that, so if you have a SeaDoo 325, you definitely want to check that out. And that was pulling around 100 RPM off the top end. So after I flashed the Stage 2 tune, I was hitting around 8200 to 8300 max. After I fixed the issue, I was able to sustain pretty much 8400 flat across the board. So that helped a significant amount. And with all those factors combined, everything I've done so far, I'm able to hit 85 miles per hour fairly consistently. Obviously, it depends on the amount of fuel that I have in the tank, but at around half a tank, it'll hit 85 miles per hour consistent. If you guys have any questions, or if there's any modifications you did to your 325 to get better performance out of it, let me know. If it's something I haven't announced yet or something I haven't talked about, I'd be happy to try it and see how it does.